Hello everyone, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about some key pieces of information that you need to understand a lot of Feng Shui. And if you have these key pieces that you can recall quickly and you really can see them in your mind, you're actually able to understand a lot of complicated stuff that's out there without having to ask, where does this come from? Because you'll know. But the very first thing you need to know about Feng Shui is it is not magic. It gives you a greater return on investment on your efforts to work or improve your skill sets. It basically gives you better luck when you have good Feng Shui. And of course, if you have poor Feng Shui, it gives you less luck. But it doesn't magically make your life better if you have good Feng Shui unless you do something with it. In order to make sense of Feng Shui as a whole, and that is like at the stage where everything meshes together and you can see this and you can understand where everything comes from and it makes sense, there are actually not a whole lot of ideas, but it's a handful, that if you have these ideas and these charts that you can recall in your head, you must understand these to actually be able to see Feng Shui as a whole. So there's a little effort involved here. Now this list that I'm giving you is not complete. It really doesn't cover anything with the hexagrams, but I do have videos about that. But it covers about 80% of the heart of San Yuan Feng Shui, which is the real common, and what is used the most often because it's effective, part of Feng Shui. Now, once you understand these concepts, you can make a lot more sense of what you hear when they don't tell you where this idea comes from. And you'll sometimes hear these complicated things and you go, well, why do you do it this way? If you understand these basics, you actually understand why they're doing it that way. Basically, that is through recognizing certain patterns. And then when you do that, you say, okay, this is where it comes from. I can go back and check on this. But then that means you can concentrate on the details without having to worry about where does this come from. It also can help you to understand when maybe something is made up, and I have that in quotes. Most people who talk about Feng Shui don't mean to deceive people. Especially when they come up with something that's like simplified or non-standard. But sometime when you try to simplify things, it can lead to misunderstandings. This happens a lot in science when you have someone who's tries to give a layman's explanation of things. That often leads to a lot of misunderstandings because you just don't, it's just some concepts are very hard to explain without getting quite technical. But let's go back to what these items are. The first one is the 5 elements, their growth, weakening, and controlling cycles, and the stars, that is the numbers that are associated with the 5 elements. And here they are. So we have the growth cycle, which if you order your things in this direction, and you can start with any on the top with anything you like, but this is somewhat standard. You can think of, okay, fire produces ash, which is kind of like earth. Earth is where you get metal. If you think about in campgrounds where you have a water pump, an actual one that you have to pump, those are always made out of metal because that will function a very long time. That produces water. And then water, of course, is what it takes to grow plants, including wood. And then wood, when you burn, creates fire, or that idea anyway. And you have 9 that's associated with fire, 2, 5, and 8 with earth, 6 and 7 with metal, 1 with water, and 3 or 4 with wood. The weakening cycle just goes in the opposite direction. And this is why we use metal to weaken earth. And we use it really only to do the 2 and the 5. And once we reach period 9, we really use it mostly for the 5. But we don't use earth much to weaken fire. Fire in general is kind of good. It gives you energy and things like this. But if you're someone who has too much energy, then the earth, you can place earth to weaken that. Wood represents growth and creativity and things like this. So, but the 3 can sometimes lead to arguments, and if that seems to be the case, then you would use a little bit of fire. In general, we never want to weaken water because 1 is generally a very good star. It also represents noble people and all this kind of stuff. So in general, you don't use wood to weaken water. Now, this doesn't mean you cannot use wood furniture. You can. It's just that if you don't add wood to try to weaken water in general. You can add a plant if you want, but you have to be a little careful with that. There are better places for it. Water does weaken metal, and you can use that to weaken the 7 if the 7 becomes a problem. But you don't need to do it unless it is a problem. And this is the controlling cycle. And this one is the harder one to remember. I mean, this one is easy, then the weakening just goes the other way. This one's a little harder, but it does make a 5-point star. And so if we start with wood, which is where I start my 5-point stars, wood depletes earth. It takes the minerals and carbon and nitrogen from the soil, and it creates itself. Earth muddies water. So that's how I think about it, controlling it. Water puts out fire, so it controls fire. Fire melts metal, controls metal. And then metal chops wood, which is how metal controls wood. So this is how I remember it. And again, this isn't used very much in actual mitigation or curing of things, because although this does cure something, it tends to cure it in a rather painful way, but it cures it very quickly. So if you have something very serious that needs curing, you can use the controlling cycle. It's just going to be painful, but it'll be fixed. And it's a matter of which one you want to do. Weakening is a lot safer. Controlling is a lot faster. So this is ways that you can look at this. And in general, I usually tell you about the weakening, because this is a much safer way to go about it. It's slower, but it's not painful. Now, I do want you to ignore the color associated with the numbers, because this was just used to help people remember the properties of these different stars and the different elements without having to have a book. They really aren't truly associated with the numbers. So paint your room walls the color you like, not something that's associated with the star of that sector. The second thing that you really need to understand is the early and later heaven baguas and the relative position of the guas. This you will see again and again and again in some of the more complicated mitigations. So this is the early heavens bagua, and this is the later heavens bagua. Now I put these in this type of a thing rather than in the more normal octagon, is because sometimes it's really hard to figure out which gua you're talking about. Now the guas are the trigrams. And if you notice here, in the early heavens, everything is opposite. This is all solid lines, this is all broken lines. Solid on top, 2 broken. Broken on top, 2 solid, and this is solid on top, 2 broken. So everything is opposite one another. This represents the ideal world. Whereas the later heavens bagua represents the real world. And you will see that they have different positions. They no longer completely opposite, only the north and the south stay completely opposite. But it's different than what we had here. And this is where these two things are linked. So you need to decide on what is a focus sector. And in this case, we'll just say south. So here in the south, we have the Qiangua in the early heavens, but here it's located in the northwest in the later heavens. So these two sectors are linked. In the later heavens, the Li sector in the south is connected to the east sector in the early heavens because it's the same, these are the same guas. So you will see a pattern that develops by doing this for each one of these exterior directions. And this is what it looks like. So you have a focus sector, and you will have these sectors are the ones that are linked. For the southwest, it's these. For the west, it's these. For the northwest, it's these. I mean, you will see these patterns pop up on several occasions. This happens with, I believe, with the mitigation of the three killings, I think. This also has to do with personalized timing for important activities, really important activities. I've covered this very, very briefly. It's quite complicated, and I'm still trying to work out how to simplify it well enough that I can make a video that's understandable. This can be sometimes a bit hard. Now, if you are looking to put this in like a Word file or something for yourself, I use the I Ching Futo font. This is I think, open source font or something like this. It has all the guas, that is the trigrams, and all the hexagrams. Unfortunately, they're not ordered in a very easy way to find, but they're all there. So if you want to use that, you can. If somebody knows of a better set of fonts, I would really love to know that. Right now, I do have a chart that I've created that will help me find everything in a much more quick way than trying to go through like putting it in as a symbol. And that's a real pain. But that's to help the people who really want to do this in the computer and not on paper. The next thing you need to learn is the Lo Shu stars and elements and the Lo Shu pattern of the star placement. This is actually very key. The Lo Shu pattern is ultra important to understand how things move. Now, the Lo Shu stars and elements are basically this is where you get your 5 elements from. And in how they are placed inside your house. So here is the Lo Shu, and usually it's just shown with just numbers, and you can look at it that way, but I've also color-coded them. The earth is here in yellow, the fire is in pink, the green is wood, the blue is water, and the gray is metal. So this defines what elements are in your house, regardless of your house facing. This just shows where these elements exist inside your house. And this is the Lo Shu pattern. Now, you always want to start in the center, because if you are given a month, a day, or whatever, the Lo Shu pattern they will always tell you what is the center star. And you have to then fill out the rest of the Lo Shu with this. So if you do this often enough, it's in your hand, and you can do this in your sleep. So you just follow the number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can do this backwards too. And in the flying stars, sometimes you do have to go backwards. So you again start in the center, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9, 8, 7, 6, and you're back to 5. And this is used in the annual star charts, the monthly star charts, even the day charts. and also in the purple white and your flying stars. So this pattern is extraordinarily important. Another thing that you use that it will really help you understand things is the her-two combinations. This isn't quite as common, but there are quite a few things that use this, and when you understand this, then you're able to understand what some things that otherwise don't make sense, because the elements associated with the combos don't necessarily have to do with the stars themselves. It's a little bit strange, but basically you just have to accept it, and it always has to do with combos. It's not kind of like all by itself. So here is the her-two. This is the normal way it's shown. Sometimes they put 5 and 10 in the center, but I just use 5. And each one of these combos represents a certain element. So the 1 and the 6 represent water, the 8 and the 3, and this is usually talked about in the same sector, that represents wood. The 2 and the 5, the 2 and the 7, that represents fire. Now, neither one of these are fire, but together they represent fire. It's a little weird, and you just have to accept it. And then the 4 and the 9 represent metal, even though, again, neither of these are metal. At least here, 1 is water, that makes some sense. 3 is wood, that makes some sense. But these you just have to get used to. And these combos in general are only active when they're in the correct location, or when the correct annual star enters the sector where these combos already exist, even though they may not be in the right sector. So, for example, if you have a 1 and a 6 in the north sector of your house, that's a permanent her-two for the north. But if it's in the west, it won't become a her-two until the annual star 1 enters that sector. And that is the west sector where your 2 and the 6 were. So this is something that you kind of have to get used to. And a lot of people think they have a her-two when it's only an annual one. Still, it's good, but you have to distinguish between permanent and temporary. Now, the 2 and the 7 are a little weird. In the south, where it's fire, they also, of course, are permanent. But this also goes through that diagonal southwest, northeast center, that's Earth. So this is a real special case. This actually gives the fire energies that are associated with the 2-7 combo, but this also the stability of the Earth. So in some ways, that's actually better than having it in the south, because you have more stability. Maybe it's not quite so fiery, but it's continuously fiery. So I kind of like that better, because fire can burn you out if it's too strong. But if you have it here, it's maybe not continuously as strong, but you have it again and again and again. And so I like that actually better. Now this is not the last thing, but almost the last thing. It's the 24 mountain compass and its associated entity. It'll either be an animal, an element, or there are 4 others that have a meaning in English, but I've never seen it written in English, so I'm going to follow the convention and just use the Chinese names. Of course, I'm Romanizing them. I'm not quite sure which Romanization it is, but it's the standard one. So this is the 24 mountain compass. North is in the center of the rat. Now, you will see elements, but you do not see Earth. That's just the way it is. But you will see in the cardinal directions you will have the elements yang first and then yin. And if we start with water, we have the yang water, yin water. We skip the ordinal direction, yang wood, yin wood. You notice that's the growth direction. Water produces wood. Skip the ordinal, yang fire, yin fire, because wood produces fire. Here's where we skip earth. So we skip the ordinal direction. We have yang metal, then yin metal. And then this ordinal one is skipped, and then you're back to the yang water. So it's growth cycle, clockwise direction. And then we start with the rat, and this is the normal order of the animals: rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. And that leaves us with just the center of the ordinal directions. And so they're just called gun and sun and kun and qian. And you just have to get used to those. They do have a meaning, but I've never seen it used anyplace else. So I'm going to follow the convention so that you will recognize it when you see it elsewhere. The last thing that you really need to understand is the animal clashes and the friends, because this is used in a lot of things. And actually, especially the animal clashes are pretty important because they have to do with when you can do things. So this, I have color-coded this with fire, earth, metal, water, and wood based on the Lo Shu. This is applied only when you're working with Feng Shui. If you're working with other systems like bazi or something like this, this may not apply. These things could have different elements. We're just talking about Feng Shui here. So a clash is always opposite on the 24 mountains. So if this is your animal sign, or if the animal sign of an important date or something like this, then the clash animal is opposite it. It's pretty simple, and most people actually have seen this before. The 3 harmony is actually very, very useful, and you will see this a lot. Here I have not done this by the element according to the Lo Shu, but I've done this by the group, the 3 harmony group. So the fire group is the tiger, horse, and dog. And that's tiger, horse, and dog. So you can see it there, you can see it here, and you can see it here. So these 3 are linked, and they're called the fire trio. And then you have the rabbit, goat, and pig. That's another trio, and that's the wood trio. The dragon, monkey, and rat is the water trio, and the snake, ox, and rooster are the metal trio. And this has a lot to do with date selection, all kinds of things. And this is kind of broad. And then finally, you have the 6 harmony, which is useful, but sometimes it's more useful than other times. But this is used in, I think, in also some of the mitigations of the 3 killings. And so here you have, they're like, if you start with a rat and its adjacent one, ox, you just have to remember which way to go. Then you take the next adjacent, the next one, the next one, the next one, and the next one. And they're again color-coded too. The earth is the rat and the ox, and the wood is the tiger and the pig, and so forth. And this is basically to help you remember how these are related, so that this is something that you can call on without actually having to remember everything. But if you can remember the general 24 mountain ring, and especially the animal signs, you'll be able to remember and pick up on without much trouble. Now, time is also an important factor. So this is not something you can ignore. Which stars are timely, which ones are neutral, which basically means they're generally good as long as there's no sha qi there or other untimely stars in the combo. Now, if you have this, you can actually mitigate or cure the untimely stars if you really need to, and then they become more on the positive side. Neutral is can be very, very useful because otherwise you've only got 3 timely stars, and that leaves not much of your house terribly useful unless you can use the neutral stars. But then you have some truly negative ones, which are the untimely stars. And I do have, I think, some videos about, what is considered traditionally timely and what is also considered generally neutral. Now, this is really important to be able to interpret what the flying stars, the purple white, annual monthly charts, you need this to understand that, to understand how to interpret any one of these particular things. Of course, as the period we're living in changes, what is timely and untimely changes. And we're coming up on a big change because star 2 is going to go from an illness star to a wealth star. And so in our flying star chart, 2 will become much more positive. Now the annual, it still may act a bit more like an illness star with the star 2, but it's not as bad. You might actually still be able to use it as a wealth star. But certainly in your flying star chart you can. Now, many of the cures and mitigations in San Yuan Feng Shui are based on the elements that will tell you what kind of cure and the links between the early and the later heavens bagua. So that triangular, or maybe not perfectly triangular, but those 3 linked sectors are important. And this will occur, and you might see this, and if you remember you've got that linking, you can often understand that's what's happening. Now, you still have to worry about a little bit about personalization. And of course, if you're only dealing with yourself or your family, this is pretty easy. And so your qua number and your bazi tells you things. Your qua number will give you some useful directions, some good directions, and then the directions that you can still use, but you have to be pretty careful with. It also tells you the best directions to have the important things in your house, and the important ones are listed here. Your bazi, which has 3 different animal signs, this actually helps you avoid some placing important features where they can have a negative effect on you. And it's basically your main door and your range or cooktop locations. So this will help you understand, and you actually have to look at the clashes too in this case. And of course, I've already said many, many times, it's really good if you can put your range or your cooktop in a non-animal sign location, because then you don't have to worry about 3 of the 4 annual afflictions. You only have to worry about the 1, which is curable. The others are only mitigatable. Now, your bazi also gives you information about when the annual afflictions may affect you and what part of your life they may affect. So everything I've talked to up to this point concerns only San Yuan Feng Shui. San He Feng Shui also is there, and this is fundamentally very, very different. The considerations are really what's outside the house. The only thing it cares about your house is your main door facing direction. It doesn't care who you are, what's inside your house. It's very landscape or landform focused. It is actually considerably more complex, and it also works relatively slowly. And I've had some videos about San He and I'm going to produce some more, but I have looked at one location with a bunch of different systems, and most of the time that particular location has a good result, but sometimes it has a bad result. And you might wonder, well, how can this be? I think the real problem is Sanher isn't as well studied because of the way Sanher works. Sanher is designed to help your grandchildren rather than your own life. So it's very hard to have the same person do all this research this long. I mean, basically, this was looking at a person who was buried in a certain location and or a certain direction and this kind of thing, and then looking at the grandchildren. But if the children or grandchildren practice San Yuan Feng Shui, then you don't know which one's doing what. It's the San Yuan can fix something that you might mistake that the San He has. So this is much, much harder to figure out. That is to test out, because it takes so long to see the effects. But if you're interested, by all means, you can learn about Sanhe Feng Shui. But in general, I think it's a lot better if you understand San Yuan first before you tackle Sanhe, because this has a lot more data involved that can get quite complex. Now, unfortunately, many of the most powerful Sanhe formations require landforms that are rare or extremely rare in nature, and you're not likely to have the required landforms in your environment. And if you're in Asia, I can almost guarantee you that any place that has really good Sanhe formations already has a temple, or perhaps an extremely rich person's house. So this maybe you can find something in some other countries, but this is very hard to find in Asia because these are already recognized and they put temples there. Personally, I would not sacrifice having a place with good San Yuan Feng Shui for a place with good Sanhe Feng Shui. And that is largely due to my circumstances. I mean, I'm older, I'm over 60. I don't have time to wait for Sanhe Feng Shui to take effect. I need the San Yuan Feng Shui. Also, I don't have kids, so I don't have grandkids, so this is not so important to me. But there are people that this could be important to. For example, if you're a CEO of a large company, or perhaps a famous actor or a famous politician, and you want to have a good legacy. That is, if you're the CEO of the company, you want your company to go long after you're dead and stay a good, powerful company. And if you are an actor or a politician, you want your legacy to have a positive impact on history, that kind of thing. Then you can look into Sanhe Feng Shui. It can help you, either your company or your legacy thrive in the long term. But this is pretty rare, and I think that this is something that I'm not going to see too many people in this situation, because they'll go for somebody who has a much longer reputation than me, and that's fine with me. So that's basically it. I'd like to thank you for watching. Please feel free to contact me here if you have any questions, or visit my ad-free website. I have some information there that can help you, especially with the crawl numbers, because this can get a little complicated. And if you subscribe, I will have regular new videos and monthly videos too. Thank you again for watching.